This is the Donnan and Dayne podcast from UGAsports.com. Coach, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. How are you doing?
Doing great. Glad to have somebody to talk to here. I've been looking at a lot of four walls down here over on Hamilton Road, but it's always a pleasure to get a chance to share a few ideas and hope the fans are enjoying listening to us.
I tell you, I'm craving the day that I get to come hang out with you in your basement and just watch football with you, because when we started doing that during the season last year for our watch parties, that was some of the best football talk I've been a part of.
Well, I would think one thing, based on these projections, with the limited amount of fans supposedly going to be able to go to games, I would think that these watch parties should be stronger than Ajax next year, because give everybody an alternative and really give them the Georgia way, which that's what we present, good and bad, more good than bad. But it turned out to be really a tremendous deal that Roddy came up with, and you did a good job of projecting it. And we had a lot of people liking it, so hopefully we can expand that, because I don't think there's going to be a lot of us be able to go to the games.
I'm just saying, you got 3 more seats back there behind us in that second row. Maybe we'll have to auction those off.
Yeah.
Let's get started with just kind of where our football talk is today, and there's not a whole lot of new developments, but one of the things that people have been talking about across the nation is what could a schedule look like if certain teams are able to play and certain teams aren't, based on whatever states say in terms of the pandemic. And I don't want to get into all that specifically because I just don't think there are a lot of definites. But just in terms of scheduling and doing the process of the logistics of scheduling with another team, how difficult is that to do? Because I know there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to building a football schedule.
Yeah, for sure, particularly when you have a built-in in-state non-conference game every year that you're going to play with a rivalry game with Georgia Tech. And, for South Carolina and Clemson, it's those two. It's just a situation where, you only have so many non-conference games, and you got to make sure that you do a good job with your budget to help the rest of the programs. And for sure, I'm talking about the other sports. For sure, everybody knows all about that. But I think I remember Jim Tressel saying one time when he was at Ohio State, people getting on him for scheduling those Ohio schools. And he said, really, when you look at it, what we're doing is we're not only supplementing our program, but these in-state programs for all their sports by giving them this big check. So I think, the athletic directors do a good job, and now we've got, Josh Lee working on it from our standpoint, with the football working in conjunction with McGarity and those people. So it's just something that you got to project out and hope that you can get somebody to play you home and home, or you just go play at a neutral site if you can't get that. But it's always a situation where you're looking for what's best for the program. And back when I was coaching, you weren't nearly as concerned about the playoffs because we didn't have one. So you tried to schedule as good as you could with these other teams outside the league. But a really funny story, Coach Dooley was always good about letting me know what was going on and talking to me about things. But when I first got here, he called me up there asked me to come up to his office and said, hey, our fans really like playing Clemson, and we got a chance to play them. And what do you think about it? And I said, well, we got to look at the fact that we got to play Georgia Tech every year, and we got some of these other games coming up. And he said, well, you got to look at it from the standpoint of gives our fans a chance to do some stuff, playing back and forth. I said, okay, Coach, if that's what you think. He said, all right, we're going to announce it this afternoon at 1:00.
So it didn't matter what you were going to say.
No, I think he probably, if I'd have just laid on the floor on it, probably he would have not announced it. But I thought it's pretty funny that, he was ready to do it. And then the other thing, just overwhelming to me, which is another funny story, was I was actually planning a golf charity event up in in Ohio, in Dayton, Ohio, and back then you really didn't have cell phones. And Marshall was considering our president had talked to me at the summer meetings there at Myrtle Beach that he's looking into maybe going Division One. And when they hired me, they had talked about that, but really it was just kind of a whimsical meeting there. I mean, hey, we're considering it and everything. So I'm up there, and so I'm on the way back, and so call in the office, and my stopped at this service station, and my secretary said, "Hey, Dr. Gilley's been trying to get a hold of you." He said, "Where are you?" I said, "Well, I'm up here playing in this celebrity golf tournament, and I'm on the way back." And said, "Well, he needs for you to call him." And so I called him up, and he said, "Look," he said, "where are you?" I said, "Well, I'm about halfway between Dayton and Huntington." And he said, "Well, we're getting ready to announce we're going Division One here in about 2 hours." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, we're going to do that." And I said, "Well," he said, "can you get one of your coaches to go?" And I said, "Okay, yeah, I'll have Mickey Matthews come." But I mean, we had talked about it a little bit in the summer, like I talked, but boy, they were working on that all the way. And of course, I was happy about it. And then, the year after I left, they stayed 1AA and won the national championship. And then the next year, 2 years later, they had gone Division One and did a good job with it. But basically, coaches get a little bit of say in things. But hey, when they all push comes to shove, it gets down there to those what the administrators want.
I know fans kind of have bucket lists of stadiums that they want to go see a game at. Did you have favorite away stadiums that you liked coaching in, or do you even think in terms of that kind of thing?
No, I really could care less for some stadiums, just because I was just so happy for our home stadiums that we had at Oklahoma and North Carolina State, North Carolina, and and Marshall, and then of course the Sanford Stadium is the ultimate for me. But I really didn't get too caught up, and I know there's a lot of them that I totally disliked. But it's just a question of you got to play on the road, and we had a really good record on the road most of my coaching career. But you just got to take it as a deal. You got to make sure that the fans. You can't get too caught up in the fan situation. You got to do all you can to. And one other thing I would say about scheduling, I think that's really changed here is there's no question that Kirby's got a heavy foot in this. I mean, he's all on it, and he's trying to schedule as hard as he can, and work with the people to do it. But he's really gone on board of scheduling these tougher opponents, and I applaud him for it.
Well, and I think you've seen a shift too, just in some of the mentality of what the non-conference games look like. I would say 5, 6, even going 10 years ago, you're looking at neutral site games being some of the main draws. You get the Alabama-Florida State game of the century, which didn't turn out to be as much. But now I think we're seeing some of the benefits of a Georgia Notre Dame home and home and similar things like that. And you see that upcoming with Georgia's schedule over the next 10 years. I've got to imagine that some of what a coach likes about that is you create that atmosphere for recruiting, right?
Yeah, I mean, that atmosphere for Notre Dame game is the all-timer that I've ever been around here. And you see the fruits of the labor, how many kids committed to us that made that visit that weekend and how many are going to that were younger prospects that just saw that unbelievable atmosphere that you just can't – you can talk to people about it, but once you're around it and you take a kid out to the middle of the field there and say, how'd you like to come to Georgia, and all those people out there, I mean – kind of hard for him not to say he wants to come. So I think that the thing you got to look at hard, though, with the playoff situation now, your strength of schedule has to be considered. And until the Eastern Division gets better, we're not getting much help from the rest of the Eastern teams. Maybe Florida's had a little bit better record lately, but not against us. But the rest of them just, we're not getting much strength of schedule on that. And fortunately, this next year we're playing both Alabama and Auburn, which will help us if we can get those 2 W's.
There's a travel element to it too. I remember the year that Georgia played Alabama in the national championship. Both teams had just traveled all over the place. I mean, to do the Rose Bowl and then come back to Atlanta for a national championship in such a short amount of time, I think some of those logistics about what's going to be best for the team in terms of rest and travel, that has to come into at least some mindset, especially for later season scheduling, right?
Exactly. I know Kirby had it in his plan as soon as the game was over, as quickly as they could get through the media and everything. They had the team on a plane and the whole traveling party coming back because he knew the turnaround was going to be so quick for the next week. And I think that's something that having trainers like Ron Corson that really do a great job of teaching you about recovery and sleep deprivation and all these things that these kids need to have to be ready from week to week. That's why getting this airport here where the longer runways helped Georgia so much, because you had to take these trips to Atlanta and, add 2.5 hours coming and going every trip when you played a Western Division team, particularly if you played them in a night game at, say, 8 o'clock Central. It just takes its toll on your team as far as the rest for the next week. And the other thing, just the collisions that you're having, everybody's bigger, stronger, faster, and so you're just getting knocked around, and, your recovery it takes a little while. That's why I'm really happy, and it helps recruiting too, that Kirby plays so many players that, they practice hard, but, the games themselves, some of these guys are only getting 25, 30 reps, but they're all quality reps, but it helps your depth.
I'll tell you, we just released our top returning Bulldog number 7 series on UGAsports.com. It's a series that Brent Rollins and I are doing where we're going down the top ranked Bulldogs based on Pro Football Focus rankings. And number 7 was Devante Wyatt. And I think some fans have been a little surprised to see it. But when you go back and look at the tape, you kind of see that he made the most of the opportunities when he does get to play. Now, he's playing more and more because he's just a really good defensive lineman. But that's a great point that you make, that the more players that you can get out there, the fresher your team is going to be throughout the course of a season, which, as we've seen now, can be 15 games.
Yeah, and I think first of all, I think that's a terrific series that you and Brent put together, that the fans have got to understand that nobody else is doing things like this with your relationship with Brent and his ability to take Pro Football Focus grades and really go into the nuts and bolts, but also how many of these guys play on special teams and learn their craft. Like Tay Crowder learned how to be a good cover guy, and then they saw his tackling skills, moving the linebacker, and it's just it just creates good morale, and it helps in recruiting too when you can tell a young prospect that, look, you might be worried about who we got, but this is the proof's in the pudding. We played this many guys last year, and look how many freshmen played. So you can't ever have enough good players in any program, and Kirby's certainly getting plenty of those.
I'll tell you, number 6 on that list is a wide receiver. I'm not going to tell you who it is, and that can be the reveal for UGAsports.com. But it does bring us to kind of our football scheme question that we got. And it's kind of how Georgia receivers can do a better job of getting open. That's one of the complaints that some fans had last season, is that receivers just aren't creating separation. So kind of taking a step back from that, how do you train a wide receiver to get more separation?
Well, I think everybody has a tendency to read all these pundits and see that, all these reasons why we weren't able to throw the ball and catch it effectively. But, bottom line is we lost a lot of good players, not only to the draft, but through one guy getting suspended, losing Holloman, and then Cager getting hurt. So, it's all a process of gaining experience and getting better at it. And, we knew we had a good defense, and the defense kept getting better. So, a lot of times defensive players play down and distance, and basically it looks like you're not getting any separation, but basically they're not really worried about anything but trying to stop that play and, based on the formation. So a lot of times we got caught up in down and distance, and the defense just had a really good call. But I would say overall, as far as training, first thing you got to do with a receiver, he certainly got to have innate skills of being able to definitely run. That's a number. You don't find too many slow receivers playing anywhere. And, having good ball skills, good eye, visual acuity, being able to look the ball in. And so many of these guys, when they come to college, really had never had eye tests, have never had their eyes tested. So that's one of the first things we used to do with Dr. Thomas and his associates and now his son, have all these guys tested. And a lot of them needed contacts. A lot of them needed help in their depth perception because somebody will say, well, he doesn't have good hands. How do you know he doesn't have good hands? Maybe it's because he can't see. So we worked hard on that. But as far as just ability to separate, the first thing you got to do is be able to get off the line. You got to be able to release against all these press coverage. It's not all this hunky-dory stuff where people line up in 3 deep and you can just run down there and you got a running start on the guy. You got to be able to release and separate from that standpoint. If you can't get off the line, then you're really in tough shape. And one thing I saw in the practices I used to watch here when I would go over there is our receivers really do a pretty good job of getting off the press coverage because Kirby and his staff, probably as good as anybody in the country, teaching press coverage with a defensive back. So they get good practice day in and day out. And they work on that kind of release and separation. And they work hard on goal line routes and stuff like that. That you would see that we've been really good at throwing the fade and the fade stop or back shoulder about as good as anybody. Jake would throw that down there. So I thought that was good separation the way we did that. So the other thing is after you release is then know what your route is and make sure you don't give it away. A lot of times guys will stand up right before their break, and you want to try to stay as low and fast as you can into your break. And the other thing is eyes on the ball, being able to relate to the catch, using your hand placement. Usually speaking, anything above the waist, you would have your thumbs in to catch the ball, and anything below the waist, your thumbs out. So you got that cradle to help you with your elbows and things like that if the ball's low and outside. And we always teach them if the ball is low and you need to, go onto the ground and use the ground as a backstop there and use your body to help you because it doesn't make any difference if you drop it, if you bend over. You got to make sure you get it all you can, so take what you can. And then the other thing is if the ball's in anywhere, of course you have – now you got these kind of deals where they'll have the visual playback, but we always tell them if there's any doubt about whether you call it or not, hold the ball up right away and put the pressure on the ref to make the call. Like I got it. That's not cheating. That's just using the rules there. Just make sure those guys see it. And the other thing is when you do bend over, it's kind of like a softball player, baseball player, bend from the waist down. Don't just stick your hands down there. Bend with your hips and get low and present a chance to catch it. The other thing we try to work hard on is simulating the route without working so much on conditioning because let's just say you're throwing a 15-yard route and you want to catch it 6 or 7 times. Well, you got to run down there 15, 16 yards, and you're going to run the whole part of practice. So what we would do is just practice the last part of the break. So still have the quarterback the same distance that he needs to be, but you get down the field and you just stand there. And then when the quarterback reaches his apex of his drop, then the receiver coach tell you to make your break, and then you go ahead and catch the ball. But you get a lot more catches without a lot of running there, and that's what you want to do because depth perception comes into a very good part there of being able to see the ball and look it in. And then what we always say is break away from the defender. So if you're catching the ball on the in breaking route, you got to figure people are coming from your inside. So you want to break back to the outside after you catch it. And then if you're breaking out, sometimes you can put your shoulder down and stay on the boundary and keep running or break back to the inside. And the last thing would be, running toward the pylon. Wherever you catch the ball, regardless if you're a running back, receiver, or a defensive back, we always say run toward the pylon so you can try to put some distance between yourself because you don't want to cut back into people. So you catch it, and then you run toward that angle and try to make sure they don't catch you with it. So that's a few things that we used to try to teach the receivers.
I don't know if there's a team in the country better at using the boundaries and the space along the sideline better than Georgia has, especially with Jake Fromm. He was so good with some people call them back shoulders. Sometimes they're even intended underthrows, right? So the receiver can come back to it a little bit.
Yeah, I think Jake had a real good feeling for it, and we teach them if there's a certain level and they aren't back past the guy at certain, then it's an automatic back shoulder. And sometimes these guys – like Cager and Riley Ridley, those guys, they made some catches that were really underthrows, but people think they might be back shoulders. But, like I used to tell my quarterbacks, I said, who cares? I mean, he caught the ball, and so, hey, that's all you care about. So, but he was really good at anticipating where to throw the ball and did a good job. And it takes away a lot of the defense, because it's a safer throw. But, got caught on a couple there against South Carolina where the guy played the break and the ball was a little bit, behind the guy and he got an interception. But, the main thing for quarterback and receivers be on the same page as far as the coverage, as far as estimating the defensive intent and running the route accordingly. The one thing that I would say that has changed for the fans over the last 15 years or so compared to back in the old days, you used to just, run a route and you might adjust it. If a corner would, let's just say you had a shorter route and the corner came up and played cover two or tried to jam you, you just go ahead and try to release and get around him because you didn't want to throw a ball into a jam corner there and get a pick. And that was pretty much the only adjustment you pretty much made back then. But now we have these man zone combos where if it's man, I'm going to do this, and if it's zone, I'm going to do that because you don't know what they're going to be doing. So back in the old days, we used to have routes for man and route for zone and hope you had the good call by the quarterback and the coach. But now you just realize whether they're in man or zone, and particularly the inside receivers like the slots or tight ends. And what you try to do there is just read the linebacker's shoulders. If he's going to go and release, he's going to probably turn his shoulders and really open up to go back to a definite zone area. Whereas on a man situation, he's probably going to stay pretty square and try to get inside you. So, for example, let's just say we have a crossing route and the guy's playing zone. You just run over there and you see him go deep. You just hook up right in that area. And if it's a man, then you'll try to just release and beat him to the inside and keep running because if he's man, you don't want to hook up. And the one thing we always try to do to separate there, like these fans are wanting, is to give him a step up the field like you're going deep to try to get him turning towards you, and then you can come under him and outrun him a lot of times because once he takes a step up the field and you're going across, he's got no chance.
I know you love your basketball players that wind up playing football for you, but you saw them play basketball in high school. How much of it is that just general, I'm going to misdirect or shake my defender one way or another to get the correct angle or the correct leverage? How much of that comes into play for a wide receiver?
Yeah, hey, if you got the athletic skills, whatever sport it is, it's going to transcend to the game. And one thing I always try to tell our receivers, hey, you're not going to get that many balls thrown to you during the course of a game. So practice what you need to do when you're not getting the ball to see how you can get away from this guy because he doesn't know that you're throwing the ball to him or not. So when the time comes when we got to have it, you know what your best release is going to be. Is it going to be a jab release on the line of scrimmage? Is it going to be a two-step? Is it going to be a swat where you just take your hand over the top, or is it going to be a swim move, where you take over the top, or a swat where you, instead of just taking your hand over, you take your other arm and hit down on him like a karate chop to try to separate him from holding you. So but when he really comes push to shove, you know what to do, and you know what your best release is, and you know if you can get by the guy or not. I always talk to our players And Kirby's great at that about talking to our players now is what can you do to beat this guy? I mean, is he as good as we thought he was, or is he not? And of course, most guys, hey, I can beat this guy. Hey, you want to be level with him. You want him to tell you, hey, I can do this on this guy and I can do that. And that's what you try to count on.
Well, there aren't many Derek Stingley Juniors in the world, and I'm sure he'll get beat sometimes too. He didn't show it much for LSU throughout the season, but each cornerback is going to have their own thing that they can get beat with, like you said. And I think Georgia fans should be really excited for the wide receivers going into the 2020 season because what you saw from George Pickens and Dominic Blaylock, I mean, those are true freshmen.
Yeah, and you had the other guys in there, and we're going to be really good at receiver. I'm excited about that. And the freshmen we got coming in really bring a lot of talent, speed, size. This is the kind of class you need, kind of like the defensive secondary we brought in last year. All these guys helping us right away, like Seen and Stevenson and those guys. It's just good to know that you got those kind of guys stepping up on a wide receiver too.
Well, and I think it's good to know that from what we've all heard, Jamie Newman has done a good job in trying to get to know these receivers, and even before the pandemic, throwing with them as much as he could. At that
no question, he's done that, and of course the guys that have been here have a good idea about him. Stetson does, and Dwan Mathis, they've got good. They've done thrown a lot of balls to him.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, I know you're a proud papa a little bit this week because you get another player with another Hall of Fame honors. Richard Seymour is now going into the Patriots Hall of Fame, and I don't know if there are any more accolades that can be had for Richard Seymour, but that's got to make you proud.
Yeah, it really does, and I'm hoping that Richard's come close the last couple of years on the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and that's such a hard thing to get into. But I feel like it's just a matter of time before he gets in there with all the stats he has, with all the success he had, and just to leave here and go right up to the Patriots and go to be a part of 3 Super Bowl winning teams right off the bat in his career was just a huge testimony for the kind of player he was. And, the guy was just a phenom coming out of high school from the standpoint of just a big, strong, physical guy, but hadn't had a lot of tape because he was, just kind of maturing there late as far as size and everything. But we knew when we looked at him that he was a can't-miss guy as far as being a really good college player and had everything ahead of him to be a pro player. But he worked hard at it the whole time he was here. Was a good team guy, had a lot of leadership, came from a good family. And, the one story we always say, tell a little story, but we got him here and, he had a big shoe. I don't even know. I think 17 or 18. I don't know what size shoe he had, but it was big. And, we always ordered the shoes based on the varsity and everything. And then freshmen, we'd pick them up later if we needed them. And we were playing South Carolina for the first home game. And we went down there, and he was on the dress-out team and everything. And he came to me and said, look, he said, I don't have any game shoes, Coach. He said, come on, I'm playing against my homeboys here. And so I went over there and I asked Dave Allen, I said, what's going on? You ain't got any shoes for this guy? He said, Coach, we don't have any of those. He said, we got some older ones here. I said, well, hey, get it, check around and everything. And as fate would have it, called up South Carolina, and they had some. And we didn't tell them who it was for because they would have been mad if they known it was Seymour. But we sent they shipped them over here, and then we just painted our swoosh on it. And he turned out had his own shoes there for the South Carolina game. But just a tremendous guy to have in your program, and he's been so supportive over the years to whoever the coach was. But he's been very happy to see Kirby take over here, and has been around a lot. And when guys like him and Champ are standing on the sideline, or Marcus Stroud, Josh Millard, these guys we've talked about before, Randy McMichael, it just adds to the fact that Kirby is bringing everybody back, and the Georgia tradition means so much to them. And Richard Seymour. I mean, when you talk about great defensive players that have played in any level, he's got to be right up there with them. The only guy that I had even remotely close to him as far as strength and quickness was Tony Casillas at University of Oklahoma, the nose guard that ended up being and got in the College Hall of Fame and played for Atlanta. But they're both just dominating players, no question.
Do you remember any of the conversations you had with NFL coaches or scouts leading up to Seymour's draft? Because I have to imagine your phone would have been blowing up.
Well, back then they certainly had the combine and all that, but you got associations with coaches like Coach Smart has one with Joe Judge. They coached together at Alabama, and I'm sure he realized what kind of technique and everything Kirby had taught, Andrew Thomas and also Crowder. And they got to feel like they get two good players there. And, I had an existing relationship with Bill Belichick because Bill Parcells and I used to be in the same office at Florida State, and we stayed up with each other over the years. And I got to know Bill when he was assistant coach, Belichick, and he would check on guys. I think the first guy I ever talked to him about was really Patrick Pass, who he sent Charlie Weiss down here for a workout for him, and Patrick was going to, go out and catch some passes, and the guy that's supposed to throw for him didn't show up, and Patrick came in. He said, "Coach, I got a problem here." So I got this coach from the Patriots here, and he wants to work me out, but he's a big old guy, and I don't think he can throw too good. And I said, "Well, I'll go out and throw to you." So I went out there, and I knew what Patrick could do. And of course, I lost a little bit from my old days, but I did a lot of drills when I was here, and so I just went out there and I said, "Patrick, we'll go through mostly the tree, but we're going to stay pretty close here because my old wing wasn't there." And so I put him through the paces, and he looked good, and we threw the routes that he did good. And, Patrick's another guy that played up there along with Seymour on some of those Super Bowl teams. And, I'd had Troy Brown from Marshall who had a great career with Belichick too. So it's just a case of not dropping names. All these coaches that if they got any thoughts about anybody, they're going to ask you what they think. I mean, we had some texts during this last draft about guys that what do I think about them, and I hope that I helped them. That's for sure. I told them straight scoop on them because it's just like a high school coach. You don't want some high school coach to sell you a bill of goods, and then you down the road the guy doesn't turn out to be a player. You got to be level with these guys, and in Richard Seymour's case, there wasn't any question about it. But I think for them to take a D lineman, the sixth pick in the draft, I think that's what he was. Goes to show you what that they'd done their homework. And then Marcus goes, I think, like 14th or 15th, maybe 11th there to the Jaguars. So, but really had some really good players on those couple defensive years we had there with so many of them getting drafted, and they've turned out to be great men too and big leaders in the community.
I want to give one quick shout out to another one of your former players. The University of Georgia Athletic Department did a story on Shedrick Wynn for earning his bachelor's degree 20 years later. He just graduated with the class of 2020. And it's a really good story. You can we posted it on the Dog Vent as well if people want to go read it at ugasports.com. And it's just a good story of perseverance and not giving up on his education. He had some bumps in the road with family medical things, and he was there for his family. And it was just a really good story to read.
Yeah, I'm telling you this, that as much as you're proud of a guy in the limelight like Richard, you're even as much proud of a guy like Shed who did what he needed to with his family, but came back. And he had a lot of help here with Glada Gunnels Horvat. I got to make sure I call her by the right name. But I think she's been over at Georgia now 40 years. So I kidded her. I said, "Did you start working here when you were 10?" But she's been here for a long time and does a good job behind the scenes with these athletes and knowing the rules and going through the right deal. But for him to get his degree is an achievement that gives him a lot of personal satisfaction. I was able to get his number from a couple people and texted him, and he was glad to hear from me. But just he's just so proud, and that's the way. One thing that I think Georgia's going to always do is work as hard as they can to help you get into your chosen profession, whatever it might be, if it's pro ball or whatever. But also, if you hadn't got your degree, we've had a lot of guys come back and finish it up. Another guy I wanted to mention in the D line was Demetric Evans, who didn't play a lot here as far as a starter because he had those guys ahead of him, but ended up playing in the NFL for 12 years or 11 years as a starter, and now works for the NFL in full time and helping place guys and helping people when they get out of off of the rosters, help them develop and get jobs and all. And he comes back here and every year for a tailgate. His wife's a gynecologist there in the Fort Worth area, and just a tremendous representative of University of Georgia. And he's got a powerful job with the NFL. And he's another guy that was young too. He was only 17 when he got here, and we could have held him out a year, would have helped him, but to play more. But he was ready to play right off the bat. And Coach Selfo, Rodney Garner, they did a good job of helping us recruit him right out of Louisiana, and he turned out to be a heck of a player for us and even better pro.
It's so funny how you hear these former players and kind of see where their lives go from there. I mean, Russ Tanner helped me with the mortgage for our house because he works out of Oconee County, and we live up here now. And there's a lot of people that fall in love with Athens after their college tenure and hopefully finish.
Hey, Russ Tanner and his roommate David Pollock were the last two guys I basically recruited here, and several others in that class. But boy, what great reps they've been for Georgia. And Russ always said he's the best player to come out of Riceville, Georgia, but I think a lot of people would question that. But hey, Russ is a good community guy too, helps coach Little League football and does a lot of good things. And I guarantee you he got you as good a deal as you can, because that guy can wheel and deal.
His recruiting story at Notre Dame is one of the funniest stories I've ever heard. I'll have to get him on here to tell us that one again, because I've heard it probably 2 or 3 times already. It's just
they probably couldn't understand him. That's the biggest thing.
Hey, Coach, I want to leave you with one stat that I did a little research for, and it's because you mentioned Andrew Thomas a second ago. So Andrew Thomas was the number 4 pick in the NFL draft this year. Anthony Edwards in basketball is projected to be a top 5 selection in the NBA draft. Emerson Hancock, Georgia's starting pitcher, is projected to be a top 5 pick in the Major League Baseball draft. If they are top 5 picks, it will be the first time in 32 years that one school has had top 5 picks in baseball, basketball, and football in the same year.
Hey, that's amazing. That would be tremendous. And all 3 are great representatives of Georgia. Things didn't work out as good in basketball as we hoped. But, I think they're laying some pipe over there to get it going. And then, of course, baseball, I thought we were on route for a big year here. Really happy for all 3 of them. That'll be tremendous.
Previous team that did it was Auburn in 1988. And you can go look on UGAsports.com to see who those players were. One was Andre Bruce that went first overall to the Atlanta Falcons. I think a lot of Falcons fans don't want to remember that selection, but we'll leave that for another time. Coach, always enjoy it. We'll do it again next week. And if you have football questions for Coach, you can hit me up on Twitter at Dayne Young. That's DayneYeyoung. Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.